Does anybody object if I start my AI companion on this for summary? Started. Okay. My name is Mary Didoni. I am currently the chair of the Education Committee for the Anne Arundel County branch of the NAACP. We find ourselves at the point in the redistricting process for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We were now looking at the second portion, which means that we are looking at what is generally considered the southern part of the county, representing almost just a bit over half of the students and a bit shy of half of the schools in the district. It's a process we've been through before, but the way of going through the process was different this time. There's a whole lot more engagement, a whole lot more transparency. I recognize all that AACPS went to make that happen. And it continues now. A few days ago, the superintendent presented 2 recommendations to the board. The decision is now in the board's hands. Board members, you can unmute yourselves and correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that you can make changes to those recommendations. You can accept one or the other of the recommendations, and you will be receiving public input. At a workshop that's coming up, you may not be receiving the input there, but at subsequent board meetings, and of course, through the usual mechanisms of we have your emails and phone numbers, you will be hearing from the public. And I see Dana Schelheim's hand went up, and then Joanna Tobin's.
I should unmute so I can you can hear me. Yeah, the workshop, there's no public testimony. There will be a public briefing. There'll be a vote on a plan or plans on the September 17th meeting, and then there'll be public briefings and public hearings. And I'm assuming those will both be plural because I think that's what we all want. So yeah, in advance of voting on a final plan for implementation in November.
Thank you. And Joanna Tobin.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I just want to add a couple of other things, which is we as a board determined that at our public hearings that Dana referenced, there will be unlimited speakers. In other words, there will be as many slots as people need because we feel that's important. And just to clarify, just like the budget, we will not be taking testimony on redistricting at regular board meetings.
Okay, good.
Only at the specific hearings for that. And as Dana said, we vote on what plan or plans to move forward for hearings on September 17th. The final vote will be November 19th. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I know this calendar has been laid out, and I will try to clarify it with the board because I know you guys are the ones in charge now, and then publish it through the mechanisms we at the NAACP have. Don Pulliam, representing District 7 on the board.
Good afternoon, everyone. The only thing that I did not hear, and if you said it, Dana, please forgive me, it's that you have to sign up 24 hours beforehand. So yes, we're taking comments from everybody. We're staying there as long as we have folks but you have to sign up 24 hours beforehand. They are not taking any more requests after that. So they will have something on the website to sign up. I'm not sure if it's there now. I can check, but again, if it's just like the other 3 and the previous one, you have to sign up in order to be able to have your voice heard. And so for some of our communities, what I'm doing is getting out there. Like this morning, I was out in some of our Hispanic communities to start getting the word out, giving them information. They're going to have to sign up on a web link.
A web link.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, this is part of the mandate for the Education Committee is to make this information available. So I will be coordinating with the board to make sure that I have the appropriate information to distribute to NAACP membership with the approval of President Waddy, so that with the reach we can provide as well, people will at least know. For the people who are signing in and for the people who may be watching after the fact, again, this will be posted. I presented, the board members with us tonight have been presented with 3 questions, but are invited to say what they need to say. We are here to discuss and also to learn from your perspectives. The questions I asked were basically of the plans that have been presented, recommendations 1 and 2. You do a relative risk benefit individually and then pro-con comparison as you see it for the district that you represent. Then for the totality of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, because whatever change we make will affect not just the southern half of the county. It will affect AACPS as a totality. And then the 3rd question was specifically with respect to the NAACP, and I had presented a copy of our mission for the NAACP, which, by the way, changed 2 or 3 years ago. So you've seen the new one, and the responsibilities of the Education Committee. How do you believe we should be involved? I'd like us to have a chance to engage with you on that discussion. Anybody want to comment on that? Okay. Then I'm going to go numerically, because what we have represented here are districts. They are county councilmanic districts 5, 6, and 7. And Dana Schelheim represents councilmanic district 5, which is frequently referred to as Severna Park, but that's not geographically exactly right as far as I know. May I ask you to address the questions? And what I would advise is that we listen to what you have to say. And then if there are individual questions for Ms. Schelheim, I would invite those, including conversation back and forth with the other board members who are present. Is that okay? And then we'll go on and do the same with the other board members.
Sure. Remind me what the first one was.
It's impact in your district.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Pros and cons, risks and benefits.
Sure. So yes, I represent
Opportunity
district.
threats.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that. My kid was texting me in the midst of this, so I answer her text. So yes. Firstly, I represent District 5. It's not just Severna Park, it's the Broadneck Peninsula, Revel Downs, all the way on up through Severna Park, part of Millersville, part of Gambrills, part of Odenton. Kind of looks like a seahorse on a map. Just like the first round of redistricting and the other districts in the second round, this does impact District 5. The scenarios presented some interesting, not before thought of scenarios that could have made things a little unorthodox for as far as kids matriculating through the Severna Park cluster. It would have brought Jones Elementary, which, by the way, is the historically most diverse school in the whole of Severna Park and has been for, the whole of Severna Park's existence, to another district for middle school and then back to Severna Park for high school. That hasn't generally been the modus operandi of the way our clusters are laid out and the way our kids move through. And so that received a lot of feedback in that first bit when it wasn't in the board's hands yet, when it was still in the superintendent side of the house. And so thankfully that was corrected or amended in this in the 2 recommendations before us now. There's a little bit that's impacting the northwestern part of my district, because I now have the physical land where Arundel High School sits. Though, let's be clear, 95% of the people who go to Arundel live in District 4. However, the physical property where Arundel Middle, Arundel High School exists is now District 5. And so there's some items up in that area that affect Piney Orchard Elementary in particular that have some impact on kids that would eventually go to Arundel or to Meade, depending on how things shake out. So that's my perspective from District 5. I am, of course, very interested in how the various recommendations and any amendments will impact the students in District 6 and District 7 and District 4. And so there's some things that, I think that need to be corrected to make historically racist boundaries disappear. We can get into that later. And so I'm working with colleagues to see what we can or should do, what makes sense from a numbers perspective, and how sort of we move forward and implement this. Whatever plan we come up with, whatever plan we implement or vote on to implement in November will go into effect fall or August, if you count August as fall, of 2026. I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you very much. So you have essentially answered questions 1 and 2, which is what is the impact, pros, cons as you see it for your district and for AACPS as a whole. The third question that was posed ahead of time was, how do you see what can the NAACP and particularly NAACP Education Committee do to be of social value, particularly to those that we, as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons, to serve everybody who needs service, to protect equity, to counter inequity?
Yeah, so I mean, it's no secret or surprise that some of our boundaries were drawn in a racist way. There's articles in the news you can Google that go back some years that discuss those things. I see redistricting. Of course, we do it for various reasons, to open to closed schools, to balance enrollment, alleviate overcrowding, undercapacity, that kind of thing. But we also have this opportunity to correct some of that in this round, and I hope we take a good hard look at that and what that might look like, and do a really deep dive to see whether or not that's something we should pursue and have the votes to do. I think what we would need from the NAACP and as we move forward through this round is to get the word out about the various dates where people can make their voice heard. I am very interested to hear from everyone. I will stay as long as needed. If folks want to call, I mean, I'm not trying to speak for the rest of my colleagues, but call or email any of us. I'm sure we all want to hear from as many folks as possible. Getting the word out about that is very, very important. And if there's any other forum in which we can be helpful as we move forward, I think we'd all like to do that. I should have said this at the very beginning, and I regret that I didn't, but I'll say it now, and this is being recorded anyway. Everything I've just stated is my personal opinion as the district rep for District 5, and I don't speak in any way on behalf of this board. So I just want to make that abundantly clear for anyone who might be watching now or listening later to this broadcast. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. And I was remiss in not mentioning it earlier. It is not just the policy and the requirement of the board that when board members go to speak, they must be consistent with anything the board has voted on, but they don't speak for the board. They speak as a board member. And I want to acknowledge, and all three of you reminded me of that. Our other board members, do you want to comment on anything that Ms. Schalheim has said so far? I would like to raise a couple of points, maybe they're questions. If we go back to the policies and regulation that guide redistricting, I believe it is policy JA and with related regulation JA-RA. I do not recall the exact wording, but within, I believe it is the policy, there is a specific recognition of the need for equity. Even though it didn't appear as an explicit criterion in any of the scenarios, it is right there in the policy. I'm perhaps going a bit too far, Dana, by asking you this question. Was I incorrect in reading into what you've just said? That the NAACP, by the way, we're learning to be a better branch as well. I'm learning to be a better member. And we were reminded by those who attended our national convention that every one of the words matters. So, as the local branch of the NAACP, would it perhaps be within our purview to look into what you've described as historically racist boundaries?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, it's laid out in black and white and print. Sometimes it takes some Googling to locate that article, but there's some articles about this already. You can look at the scenario maps. I invite everyone to do that. And by the way, please contact each of us individually or collectively as you see fit going forward. But your comments really ought to be put through the tool, the web tool, so that they can be, duly noted and counted and tallied and that kind of thing. But all one needs to do is zoom in to some of them, to those maps and draw your own conclusions. Some of the lines are, to use a Gen Z or Gen Alpha slang, a little sus. So yeah, which my daughter truly appreciates when I use her lingo. So yes, that's what I would say. I welcome anyone's commentary through the tool, and then to us, separate and apart from that, as folks see fit, good, bad, or indifferent on any and all part of the recommendations before us, so we can make the best plan possible that will be implemented afterwards. Yeah.
Joanna Tobin, Dr. Tobin, you have your hand raised. I turn to you next.
Yeah, so yes to everything Dana has just said. And just to say, with regard to racial boundaries, racist boundaries, this isn't just about between clusters, this is within clusters. So obviously I represent a district that includes the city of Annapolis. And I've often said, if you look at where almost all the public elementary schools in Annapolis are currently, most of them show you a map of white flight. They exist where people were left essentially in the public schools when, with quote unquote all due haste, the county finally decided to desegregate schools in the 60s, right? And white people left. And so this leaves us with not only, with only a few exceptions, racially drawn boundaries essentially between schools. It also means And I use Severna Park as an example simply because it's kind of shows the other end of the spectrum. I've had community members in my district come to me and say, why am I districted to a public school that's way away from where I live? I grew up in Severna Park, and all of our elementary schools were right nestled in our little neighborhoods. And that is not true for a lot of Annapolis because of what happened. And so it's a spiraling issue, right? It's not just the obvious harm of the kind of segregated structure that we've de facto got, but it is, in the case of Annapolis, the Annapolis cluster has the lowest usage of public schools relative to the population of any cluster in the county. It's 19%. Next is Southern, which is 21%. I believe Severna Park is 30-ish%. Dana, correct me if I'm wrong. So you also end up with disproportionately in certain areas, people going generations not sending their kids to the public schools. High concentrations of poverty. We have the largest number of community schools in the Annapolis cluster district of anywhere in the county. And while I applaud the community schools and the concentration of poverty grants that come through the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which is a wonderfully progressive piece of legislation in my view, it is the case that we also know it's not healthy to have high concentrations of poverty for the society at large. A healthier community is a much more socioeconomically diverse as well as racially diverse community in a school, right? That's ultimately going to build a stronger fabric for the whole community. And so you've got decades and decades of this stuff. And as I think most of you know, there's no memory that I'm aware of a redistricting this extensive in this county. It's been done in these piecemeal ways previously, which tended to reiterate these patterns because you never really looked at the whole. This redistricting has forced us, I mean, in a perfect world, we would have done the whole county at once. That was just not practicable. The staff could either run a school system or they could redistrict the entire county at once. So we're doing it in two pieces. But even that, as you noted at the beginning, Mary, is a huge number of students. I think about 56,000 students are in the area that's currently under consideration. And so, you know, this is a huge undertaking. And like Dana, I am determined as this single board member to do my level best to ensure that we do not come out of this redistricting with things just staying the same, essentially. Certainly not for the Annapolis cluster, but not for any part of the county where change needs to happen. Change is disruptive. It's scary in many cases for folks, but I think it is absolutely necessary, not just to balance our facilities, which we do have to do, but also to begin to unwind some of the injustices that have existed for a very, very long time. So, you know, just to add that perspective of this particular cluster and what we're up against here. So,
Ron, did you want to comment on what Dana had said?
Well, yeah, it's a loaded question because we've been going through this process in February, so a lot of learning.
Yeah.
I just want to start off with, I have another half hour before I go to my next meeting. So
Well, and then if it's okay with,
I yield to Dawn.
may I ask you to take on our questions, and thank you for being here.
oh, and I thank you, Joanna. I have to say this has been this process has been very eye-opening. It's been difficult to see when I just learned of the word or term white flight going through this process and the history in Anne Arundel County, and quite honestly, the history in my district. I will tell you, we have in District 7, we have 3 feeders. So we have Crofton High School, we have South River High School, and we have Southern High School feeder. There's disruption in the terms of movement in every feeder that I have. So just to level set there. The pros, when we started on May 15th, we are in a very better place today than when we first saw the maps. It was very discouraging. I do believe that with the knowledge that I'm learning in terms of some of the historical, the history in my district, it's nice to see that my colleagues are willing to work with me to right those wrongs. How we do it, it's going to be very hard. I will tell you, in District 7, in the South River High School feeder, we had a community to change their feeder system, leaving Annapolis, coming into South River High School. And it was pretty ugly. It was really, really ugly. And them coming into our feeder has disrupted other people and where they go to school. So that chain reaction, they came in and there's disruption since then. So for me, when you come in for we shouldn't be able to school shop. And this happened during a time where there was not an elected board. Thank God it's none of my colleagues now. And by their shaking of their head, I don't think this would have ever passed, but that is the truth. That's what happened in our feeder system. So for the South River High School feeder, I will say the cons there are that we had this disruption, and how do we get back to bringing our community back together and fixing that, working with Dr. Tobin, seeing what we can do, recognizing there is an issue. That's a con. In the Crofton area, again, there are some issues, right? There's historical issues where, again, the 3 of us colleagues were not on the board, and things have happened in terms of the redistricting in Crofton. And again, I am representing myself, Dawn Pulliam, not my colleagues, Dr. Tobin or Michelle Heim. When I see cons, it's disruption. It's disruption within your cluster. It's just in the family dynamic. When I look at the dynamic between Annapolis and South River High School, my heart breaks for these families, because it's how do we make it work with the least amount of disruption, and making sure that we understand the community dynamic. What is it, by us thinking we're making a move that's best, is that really the best move for the community and all the resources the community has wrapped around that child and that parent? I don't think it's a con. I think it's something that we have to make sure that we keep front and center. That's really important to me. When you say pros and cons, I don't know that we're really there yet, because we still have to make our recommendation. Once we decide which path we want to take forward as a board, I think then, for me, I'll have a much better idea of, like, I can really report that better to you. Like I said, right now, working with Dr. Tobin, seeing how we right some of these wrongs, that historical injustices, I would say, and then making sure that the most vulnerable are never leave sight, and their parents and what they deal with. You said the NAACP, what you could do. I've been thinking about this long and hard. And Mary, we started talking about this last night. And today I was with our Hispanic population. So it made me think about it even harder. number one, I think for the NAACP and for different populations, recognizing the restraints. And when I say restraints, meaning access. When we say go fill out the tool, that's not happening. So how does the NAACP bring those concerns to the process so we can capture that feedback? I'm not sure what the answer is, but that is something that's really important, because on Saturday we heard very clearly that if you're expecting feedback on a tool, most likely it isn't happening. And today, when I was in our Hispanic population, I think I saw that would also be an issue. That's something that collectively we got to work on, because their voices matter, and some are most vulnerable. So that's number one.
And Saturday was at Bywater, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, and thank you for the clarification, thank you.
Next, how, in terms of NAACP, how do we better educate and bring folks to the table? I have that problem in South County and with other populations, and I see it also with the NAACP. How do we bring them to the table? I don't know that answer, but I'm thinking about it every day. Is it going out to football team games? Is it getting out with where the parents are with their children? I'm not sure. Is it working with the coaches? That could be something as well. But how do we start educating people so they get the facts, and they're not hearing what other people are telling them. They're getting the real facts and what that we need from them to make better decisions as their representatives. I think that media likes to use education and use different populations as a trigger for readers, right? We gotta try to level set that and let us be the ones driving the information to the communities. I'm not sure about that, but that's a good place for the NAACP to work with us and our AACPS colleagues. But really, for me, my biggest fear is that we're not going to hear from the right populations. That is my biggest fear. And making decisions can't be, for me, I hear the loudest. We're the ones that we can't hear from. I personally am not going to make decisions based on who's the loudest, but I am searching for those who are not speaking and don't know that their voice is important. So that's something that's really important to me. In terms, Joanna and Dr. Tobin and Michelle Heim know a lot more about the history and racism and things like that. I'm seeing bits and bits and bits, and I'm learning, but I'm not the expert there yet. So I have to yield to them. But I will tell you, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it within communities, socioeconomics, all of those things. And I look at them and say, you don't get it sometimes. And it really is disappointing. I see it everywhere, but I do not have the history that they have. So, but I am seeing it. I am learning about it, and it's very disappointing. And so I do want to point in that. I will say for this particular exercise, I think there's different expectations where the blueprint has a set of expectations, and diversity isn't necessarily part of that mandate for the, and so there's that disconnect. Are we redistricting? Are we diversifying? And then there's the term, it's not my favorite busing. So we got to get back to what is it we're really here to do. Although the exercise would be great, how do we diversify better? How do we do those things for this particular exercise? And I had a conversation with Steve the other day. The mandate has certain requirements, but are there things that we can do organically as a whole? So am I answering your questions? I'm not sure.
You are. I don't know if others heard this back during the day when the blueprint had been in legislation and for voting. But the word spoken then by the Kerwin Commission including Dr. Kerwin, was that poverty was used as a proxy for race. I don't know how effective that was. There were those of us who felt that that was insufficient. But I offered that as a piece of history, that one little piece of history that I had. And thank you very much, Ms. Polian, for being with us. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, this is my, there's so many things that we're focusing on right now. The way you asked the question, it was great. It just changes your whole thought pattern. Just wait a minute, this is a whole different way to look at things. So I just don't want to set fault expectations on things that I don't have as much education or history on. But I'm learning. It's disappointing. And that's why I'm hoping to right a lot of these wrongs that as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tobin, may we come back to you at this point for an approach to those questions and other things that you think we should know about and consider?
Sure. So yeah, as Dawn alluded to, I think I'm just going to say this is my opinion. I think this board is genuinely, as a whole, all of us, working incredibly hard to get this right. This is a highly emotional issue. It is very hard. There is a lot of history. And people in the public sometimes can form their opinions about motivations and all sorts of things. But I will just say, on behalf of my colleagues, I hope the public understands how hard each and every one of them are working to get this right. We know lives are, the quality of life is at stake for so many people. And so, this is really serious business, and we are really working together to try to make sure that we understand, we hear, as Dawn said, from every corner that we can, and that we respond. Now, I will say, with regard to my own district, so when the superintendent put out his proposals, there really were two very different options, if you will, for the Annapolis cluster. The first one was essentially what had shown up in a couple of the initial scenarios, which was the notion of students who are in the Mills Parole cluster, then go to Annapolis Middle, would then go to South River High School. And the other option, the other proposal, which appeared in the proposals, which had not been in any of the scenarios, is that, in fact, the Mills Parole catchment students will stay in the Annapolis High School feeder, but the APEX, formerly the PVA, Performing and Visual Arts Program, that is currently, half of which is currently housed in Annapolis High, would be moved out of Annapolis High. So let me talk a little about those two things. And the meeting that Dawn alluded to on Saturday at Bywater was focused largely on looking at these two proposals. The question for most of the folks thinking about the Mills Parole option of sending those students down to South River is really around logistics, transportation, and community. So you are talking about a situation where, as we heard on Saturday, as I've known for a long time, there are many families that do not have access in that community, that do not have access to private transportation. And so when students are put on a bus to go down to South River, which is a fair distance away, if they miss the bus, there's no real option. And if they want to stay after school for an activity, or there is a reason that a parent might have to come to the school in the middle of the day, that is a big barrier. And that is a huge concern for me, because I think you're putting students in a difficult situation. You're putting families in a difficult situation. You are also effectively moving these students out of their community. Now, the pros of that plan are that South River High School has an excellent reputation as a high school. There are great opportunities. Obviously the STEM magnet is located down there as well. Additionally, it would diversify South River, quite frankly. But I have to weigh that against knowingly putting students in a situation where there are these barriers with regard to just the practicalities of getting back and forth and being moved out of their community. Now, we are talking about a lot of students. We're talking about 437 students that would be moved to South River. So that's a lot of students. You may be aware that a number of years ago, a portion of the Mills Parole catchment was districted down to South River. But again, that was a small portion. The community was split up. In this case, it would be the whole catchment. And I should also say, and this is what I've heard from community members, there's an additional issue, which is several communities in Annapolis would be included among those students who would take the bus down to South River, and there are historic issues between those communities. And there is concern about that too, that this would, again, put those students in potentially difficult situations and heighten some of those concerns. The other option, the other proposal, which is to move Apex, there are currently about, I think, exactly 250 Apex students in Annapolis High School. I believe 58 of those are Annapolis cluster students. The rest of that group come from all over the county. I think the second highest number is 41, and those students come from Meade High School. And the next highest, I believe, is Old Mill, and I think that's about 30 students. So clearly that would impact far fewer Annapolis cluster students if Apex were to be moved out of Annapolis. The superintendent has not yet said where. We've had a number of conversations. I will be asking questions about this at our workshop, August 20th. And I've made it clear, and the superintendent certainly understands, that I cannot vote on an option like that if I don't have some details about where it would go and what the logistics would be, because that would not be a responsible vote on my part. So I think the staff is working on that. The downside of that is that it would remove that magnet from being immediately available in the home district to Annapolis area students. And again, for all the reasons I said, we have a large number of students who do not have access to private transportation, and therefore getting to a consolidated bus stop can be a barrier in and of itself. But in terms of numbers, far fewer of those of the students in my district would be immediately impacted. And of course, the details are yet to be ironed out. with regard to Dawn's comments, we, I think, are very much in agreement. As everyone here, I'm sure, is aware, that there's this very unfortunate history of a small portion of what is actually District 6, which is a portion of Edgewater on the Annapolis side of the South River Bridge. They have been, over these last years, in the South River cluster. As Dawn has indicated, a lot of the pressure in her district is actually in the elementary schools in terms of space. The pressure in my district is Annapolis High, not so much in the elementary and middle schools. And I agree with Dawn that I think the South River is a logical divide between our districts. And so where you've seen the signs, stop the ping pong. The ping pong is the idea of, as was in the scenarios put out, of taking this particular group of students sort of in that little portion of Edgewater, moving them up to Mills Parole and Annapolis Middle, but then back down to South River. So that would be the ping pong, that we take them back over the bridge. So, the question is, if we were, for example, to move Apex out of Annapolis High, we potentially would have the space to move that group from Edgewater into Annapolis High. The problem is, and I'm trying to get some more solid answers on this, it could potentially push Mills Parole to a higher usage than we would like. Now, Mills Parole, recall, is a Title I school, so your threshold is already lower. Immediately, not so much. The problem is there appears to be a housing project proposal that's cleared several barriers in the Bywater area that could set up for very high projections for Mills Parole, depending on what that housing is. And that is what I need to find out from the city. So that's my next, because our staff doesn't know. We don't really have information on what kind of housing that is. And what kind of housing it is will obviously make a difference in terms of how many students are likely to be yielded from the housing. So I face the following conundrum, which is, it makes sense to me to, as I said, keep South River as the logical barrier, but I'm not comfortable risking putting the Mills Parole students in a position of immediately being overcrowded again. And I don't think any of us want to have to redistrict again in a couple of years. So I need to find that information out about that, what housing is projected there, so I can get a better sense of what the real implications for the utilization of Mills Parole would be. Because again, one of the reasons we've done this is to try to right one of the most basic systemic wrongs that was very glaring in our system. Certainly when I got on the board, certainly when Dana got on the board, which is you went around this county and it somehow seemed that usually the students with the highest needs and the most vulnerable were in the most overcrowded schools and the oldest facilities. And that is part of what we're trying to shift. If you look, for example, at our newest high school, Severn Run, that is a highly diverse school. And that is probably the most spectacular facility we have right now. And that was exactly what we wanted. Students from one of our highest need schools, Van Bachlen Elementary, for example, are districted to Severn Run, as are many other schools like that. So that is what we're trying to shift here. And so the last thing I want to do is put my Mills Parole students back in the situation of being in a very overcrowded school.
I
So-
recognize that
Yeah.
Ms. Pulliam has her hand up, and I know she has to leave us soon. May I ask you to unmute?
Sorry about that. I just want to foot stamp what Dr. Tobin's comments. I think, and this is something that we've talked about quite many times, is that we do have a regulation and a policy, and the natural barrier is the dividing line, along with the districting that are already there. My only concern here, we have started a precedence that if you don't like a school system or feeder, that you can go school shopping and get lawyers to move. So when you asked a question about diversity, and I think I danced around it, Mary, and I didn't get to the meat and potatoes there. When you talk about diversity and racism, if we're letting people say, guess what? I just don't want to play. We're going to go somewhere else. Is that really answering our question and how we become more diverse? Like if you know, like how do we deal with those situations? And that's something that I respect Dr. Tobin for. When I came to her, she definitely said, let's talk about this. I am aware of this situation. And she's absolutely right. But from different perspectives, not everyone can afford a lawyer. So we're looking at making sure things are being dealt with right. But my mom definitely wouldn't have been able to afford a lawyer. She didn't even know what the Board of Education was. So how do we look at those situations? If there was one group that has said, we don't want to go to Annapolis, we're going to get a lawyer. And the reason we don't want to go to Annapolis was socioeconomic, racial, and convenience. Oh, we don't go to Annapolis Mall. Well, guess what? I live in Crofton. I go to Annapolis Mall all the time, but I don't say, oh, I want to go live in Annapolis because I shop and do all my doctor's appointments there. It's not, look, they were able to do it. They got it. Kudos to them. But I think that goes back to your question of that diversity question. So there is the natural waterway. How much does that matter? I don't know. Now we have another group coming in, and it's not about anything like that. Does the policy even matter? Should we relook at the policy? Is the regulation, does the school boundary matter? Right now, we're looking at it, but we're looking at it from a systemic point of view. If we have communities that can get a lawyer and say, guess what? We don't like it. We're moving somewhere else. Why are we doing this? Right. So, and that's what I appreciate Dr. Tobin and Ms. Schellheim for entertaining, not entertaining, but being genuine and looking at that situation. So then we have the opposite, as Dr. Tobin mentioned, where we have students in the Bywater and very vulnerable students. So how do we deal with that dynamic? And it was one thing when we're looking at rather affluent communities paying their way in to get into a school system. Now it might be the opposite. We have communities that say, please don't take our services and some things away. So how do we do that in a way and deal with it the right way? So like I said, Dr. Tobin has been very patient with me, and so has Ms. Schellheim. I appreciate that. But how do we stop that so we can have natural diversity in our communities, work within our districts before we start pushing everything out and giving people the power via money to change what the board has laid out or voted on?
Thank you.
I do want to comment that the board back then was not elected, Miss Mary. So I think that's a big part of it. They weren't representing the people within their district. Sorry.
That is true. I think Ms. Schellheim came in on the first election onto the board, and this is your second term. Okay, and those were staggered, some 6 years, some 4 years on that first election. We have a hand of a participant up, but first I want to make sure that Dr. Tobin has had the opportunity to finish her comments, and all board members have had the opportunity to finish their comments.
So I would just add that, as noted in this, even in this issue that Dawn and I are talking about, sort of on the edges of our two districts, every decision that we make within a district is going to impact the whole of the county. We know that. I think, again, coming up with things that make sense, that serve our students, that ensure some of the best outcomes. I will add one other thing. I know I had a conversation earlier today with Dr. Bedell about this, and I know that he and the rest of the state's county superintendents are really frustrated. They've got all their data right now. It's still embargoed by the state for various reasons, and they really want to put it out because there is some really good data coming out of our schools. Annapolis High is one of them, Meade is another, all around the county. And I think for one, and I have a feeling my colleagues agree with me, I want to stick to the facts here. I want to make sure that what we're doing is based not in people's assumptions about schools, not in people's feelings about what it is to be in this school versus that school, but honestly in what is actually happening in those schools today, right now. And I think it is very important to stay focused on that and to not, I mean, it's another way of saying what Ms. Pulliam said. I'm not here to, quite frankly, coddle some of these behaviors that have in the past led to some of these unfortunate incidents that occurred. We are doing incredibly good things in the school system. And I want to make sure that every student has the best opportunity to take advantage of those things in all of our schools, inappropriately utilized facilities, not overcrowded schools, not understaffed schools. We have a ridiculously low set of vacancies right now. Our staffing is as good as it's been since I've been on the board. So there's some really positive things happening. We've just got to get this redistricting right. And I agree with everything that's been said about what the AACP can do. I think, frankly, communication is probably one of the single biggest pieces of it. Making sure the information gets out in every way possible. And right now, the community I have heard the least from is the Hispanic community. And I am very, very concerned about that. I understand a whole lot of reasons for that, believe me. But I'm very concerned about that because that's a very large portion of my district, of the whole county. And
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about that. So that's it for my comments. So thank you.
And I want to recognize the priority of set and go to Ms. Schalheim next, and then I'd like to add a comment, and then I'll take Ms. Burley's comments after that. Ms. Schalheim, please.
Yes, going back to the commentary about what's in the policy and the regulation and understanding that there's a reason why one of the sections of that talks about natural geographic dividing lines, and that this was what I was perhaps dancing around earlier. This is what I was dancing around earlier. I don't know how you couldn't call a river with a bridge over it not a natural dividing line. I've talked with folks who were once on school boards that were appointed at the time when this stuff started bubbling up. And so they have educated me as to what happened at that time and why things are the way they are. They don't need to be that way though. I don't live just because things are the way they are doesn't mean that we can't change them. I don't live my life that way. With regard to that move and its possible impact to the rest of District 6 noted, but maybe we can look at some of the other elementary schools in the area, Rolling Knolls being among them, as like perhaps a solution, especially if there's housing development coming up that we didn't previously know about, the school system might not have factored in, et cetera. So I just think there's a lot that we can do. Not everyone will be happy as a result. People, part of your identity as a parent somehow gets wrapped up into what school your children goes to. It's weird. We moved to Severna Park for one reason, and that's Severna Park High School, and that was the prize then, and it continues to be. But you know, I was a Folger parent, and then I was a Severna Park Middle parent, and now I'm a Severna Park High parent, and your part of your identity gets wrapped up into this. However, our schools up and down this county are fantastic, and each of them brings something special to our kids, individual and unique programs that some of the other ones don't have, et cetera, beyond the whole magnet thing, like just their signature programs and whatever. And so while not everyone's going to be delighted with the outcome here, I can tell you that I've never, in my other 3 times, including the first round of redistricting, and the initial Crofton redistricting, which was a hellscape I don't want to revisit. I've never seen folks, my colleagues, care so much about the outcome and work so hard to try to make it right. That was also true in the first round, but then we learned from what we did in the first round, and we're making changes and improvements in the second round of the comprehensive redistricting that I think we should all just be really proud of. And so we're all ears going through this. I don't want to take up any more time. I think I've spoken enough, but I just wanted to say those few things. So yeah.
Thank you. And before going down to Ms. Burley, I wanted to comment, you'd spoke about what the NAACP can do, and we asked the question genuinely. We have a responsibility. We may be a volunteer organization, but we're here for a reason. And it is, we have assigned duties as committees. So I want to acknowledge my colleagues who are here tonight and other people as well. I think you probably recognize most of the names. Behind the seal is our president, Stephen Waddy. Ms. Kiana Banks is the head of our Political Action Committee. Judge Claudia Barber is head of our Communications Committee, puts out those magnificent newsletters that you see. I hope I'm not missing anyone else. We and I am also a member of our executive committee, so you have been heard. And of course, we have a representative from TAC with us tonight as well, and clearly very interested persons. Ms. Burley, could I ask you to speak on this topic?
I just had, well, hello everyone. My name is Andrea Burley. I'm a parent that is joining this meeting and also a part of the NAACP, volunteering for the PAC committee. I was concerned about how this would affect children with disabilities, as I have a son who is autistic. Not only that, I heard that Ms. Dana had said that, you know, she doesn't know how parents are so wrapped up in the school that their children attend. But one of the reasons why they would be wrapped up is because there are a lot of schools out there like Severna Park. A lot of people want to move to the Severna Park area because it's wealthy. It's an area that's affluent. It's an area that receives a lot of the, you know, first ones to receive funding and to make sure their schools look good, to make sure their land is landscaped, to make sure their schools have the best of the best programs, right? And so, you know, when you can afford to live in certain places, you know, education shouldn't be based on what you can afford. It should be based on one, you know, everyone being afforded the same opportunity. So as a parent, I would love to be able to have my child go to certain schools. And with all this redistricting and people having the funds to, as Ms. Dana, not Dana Pulliam is not Pulliam, Scalium is the one who made the comment, but I agree with Dana Pulliam in how you all have to ensure that people who have the can afford the lawyers and who has the money that can say, you know, well, if we don't want to abide by what you all say, we're just going to pay someone to help us go somewhere else. That type of stuff needs to stop, because it's not giving children who really need, you know, the other to have access to these type of programs that are at the more affluent schools. And so I want to understand how you all are considering children who have disability and how that's being improved, because a lot of times the lack of resources in these local schools that are not like Sabrina, that are not like Crofton, that are not like South River, the children get left behind, or excuses are made, and they're not prepared when they leave to go to the next level. So how do you all plan to tackle that issue as well?
Thank you very much. And I see that Michelle Heim has her hand up. I'll ask her to address it. I'll comment that I think I hear embedded in your question the legacy of decisions made at an earlier time and the power of parental groups to throw money into schools
Yes.
in addition to the school budget. I invite our board members to address all of those, starting with Michelle Heim.
Yeah, a lot of that might have been the case pre-blueprint, but that's not the case in terms of our funding now. The funding follows the child now. And so I do acknowledge that well before I was a Marylander, I'm a native California born and raised, that Severna Park, in terms of its capital project, got hopscotched for reasons I don't understand in front of other needy schools. And that was the case at one point. The money follows the child now, and so a neurotypical child receives less funding, receives the foundation funding. If you're not a neurotypical, if you're a neurodiverse child, you receive extra money on top of that. If you're if you're a multilingual learner, you receive another portion of funds. If you receive free or reduced price meals, there's another part of money there as well. And so so that's how the funding works for the schools now. In terms of things like booster organizations, yeah, it's still a problem. It's something that I have advocated for changes to be made to, in terms of like PTO, PTAs, PTSAs, since I got on the board, since I was a candidate in 2018, that it can't be the case that one school is able to raise an alarming amount of money doing something silly like running around a gym, when another school can't possibly see money for extra things. I've always wanted more equity there, and I've lobbied for that repeatedly over the years. Will continue to. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. I think you were referring to my colleague Dawn Polium for some of your other comments, and I agree with what you were saying there as well. That, you know, you shouldn't just be able to lawyer up to find your school, and that's why we need to take this opportunity to make sure we do the very, very best we can to ensure that some of the wrongs of the past are corrected in this round of redistricting.
And not only that, thank you so much, Ms. Dana, right?
Dana Schalheim, yes.
Okay, so thank you so much for that. But not only that, we really have to, and I think Ms. Tobin and you all are really moving in a different, I think Ms. Tobin and her team are really moving in a different direction versus how long I've been here in Anne Arundel County, because diversity has always been an issue that people have been afraid to speak up for and say the problem, what the real problem is. And the real problem is that people who don't like people that don't look like them have been placed in positions and have been given control, and no one is really willing to say this is what the real problem is. So if we really get to the real meat and nitty and gritty and say, listen, you guys are the problem. The ones who don't want diversity is the problem. The ones who want to exclude is the problem. I think a lot of these issues will be solved if you just recognize what the problem is and get the problem out of there, and allow the door to open up for those that want to be able to have those positions, that want to make a change. If the only impact that you're doing is that you see is inside of yourself and it hasn't reached outside of you, then nobody is making an impact. And that's the thing. As a parent, I feel like I have been frustrated because not only did I have a child that was at oatmeal, but I saw it when every time I asked questions, oh, we don't know. How don't you know about things? And you're the public school system. But when I see other students that have the same kind of condition or the same type of problem that don't look like my son, they were always able to be tended to. And even when it came time for me to get try to say, hey, what can I do to help my son, or my son can do to, while he's in college, to be able to, have some of these accommodations, be able to have the college understand, it was like nobody knew what to do and nobody cared. And it was like, okay, he's getting ready to end his school year. So that's why I'm so passionate about making it known, that the problem is not funding. The problem is there's people that are continuously that look like the problem are still in office and nobody's doing anything to take them out of that seat so that true impact can be made. Everybody's afraid for people that don't look like them to be in seats, and this is the reason why the problem still exists. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, it's one word, diversity, and people don't like diversity. And so we keep hiring people who are okay with diversity not being present at the forefront of every school in Anne Arundel County.
Ms. Burley, thank you so much. I thank
You're
you as a
welcome.
member of the community. I know the work the places you show up. I thank you for being a member of the NAACP.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for the times you've been there. And thank you especially for
welcome, ma'am.
introducing the needs of the disability community is using a set of words that minimizes of the persons with ability needs. And I know we have
Yeah.
other people on this call who are passionate about that. And I asked of the board members, what is it that the NAACP Education Committee can do? And you've answered that question. But Ms. Burley has brought to the top of our awareness that we also need to constantly focus on that intersection between those who are already economically and racially marginalized and disabilities. I thank you. Dr. Tobin, by the protocol, I've been following you. Go next because you're a board member, and I see that my president, Stephen Waddy, also has his hand raised. I'm going to let the two of you decide this.
I'll be super quick, Mr. Waddy, if you'll bear with me. So I just wanted to thank Ms. Burley. I think she's absolutely right that this is of a piece. When we talk about diversity, we're also talking about all the needs that students have, and they are distinct for students. We have students with quote unquote disabilities. We have students with gifts. We have students with all sorts of things. And the whole purpose of balancing our facilities, using them appropriately, breaking down some of these historically racist barriers that we've had, is also to ensure, as I said earlier, that all our students are in schools where they have what they need, whatever those needs are. And I think Ms. Burley is also absolutely right to extend Ms. Pulliam's early comment about lawyers. It is a sad fact that the people who have fought the system, so to speak, of special education, those who have won have been those who are able or sacrifice to get their own representatives that they hire to work through the system. I will simply say this is very much a priority for our superintendent. Things are not where they should be, but they're a whole lot better than they were when I got on the board in this respect. And this redistricting is part and parcel of that. And we're going to keep working towards what we think is right for all of our students.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, my first question was about whether or not students who have disabilities, and if they're in a neighborhood that is slated to be redistricted, will they be allowed to stay in their current placement, or are they going to be required to be redistricted?
Can I jump in on
Mhm.
that? I don't know, Dana, did you have something you wanted to?
I was gonna say that the appeals process is always in effect and that we haven't discussed as a board grandfathering and what that could and may or may not look like. So those are two, the grandfathering is one item, and then the appeals process, should someone have unique and extenuating circumstances that they want the board to hear, um, we will hear those as part of appeals.
Yeah, that's a really good point that Dana brings up. So I should say by statute, we don't have to vote till April, which is ridiculous because it's way too late to let families know, and it does not give the staff sufficient time for the logistical transportation stuff that has to happen. But another reason that we vote in November is so that there is ample time for appeals for those families that have particular needs they think should be considered in keeping their child in the school they're currently in, or whatever it is. That being said, I think it can depend at times, to your question, Mr. Waddy, about what's available at that school. We're about to open, for example, a very specific program at Severn Run, very inclusive program for students with special needs. Obviously, Severn Run's not being redistricted at the moment, but were that in another school, for example, I think that would go into the calculus. Does a student, need to be at that school to be a part of that program? In which case, they would stay there. And so it comes down to some extent to individual concerns. It comes down to what resources are where, and then we, as Dana said, as a board, we haven't yet made that determination what exactly the grandfathering is going to look like in this case.
Okay, it was a question that came up last night at the Arundel parents meeting that I went to at Odenton Library, and I gave the parent the name of the person who is part of the disabilities office, because I know that they're involved as well in this discussion, in this redistricting discussion. So that's one thing that the NAACP was able to do, and I know we have quite a few members who also have students with disabilities in our branch. The other have the next question I had is in regards to we have Arundel and Meade are now part of the discussion with this new redistricting in both scenarios. First of all, are you the last word, or is the superintendent the last word on the redistricting? Is it the school board or is it the superintendent?
It's the board.
Okay. And so in terms of that was another question that came up last night. Who is the last word? And so I just want to be sure that it was the school board that was the last word and not the
We're the
superintendent.
lucky ones.
Right, exactly. Then the regarding it's families that live in Watchapel that live off Watchapel that are like in the Piney Orchard area that would be moving from Arundel, the Arundel cluster, because the Crofton families are moving to Arundel, then the Arundel families are moving to Meade. And in the meeting that I went to, it was the all of the tropes came out. First, I thought they did a good job praising the fact that there was not a parent commission this go round, because the parent commissions breed racism, classism, all of the isms, and like when that's what happened, I think, with Crofton. And so this new objective study that came out helped to tamper down those concerns, but also kind of put them put the concerns around diversity in the background. So there were people who brought it up. It didn't take very long for that concern to be brought up to say, I didn't want to send my kids to Meade High School in the first place because it's such a bad school. That was the comment. And then the response was from the moderator, yes, you're going from the number 13 school in the state to the number 100 and something school in the state, as if there's nothing positive about Meade or any of the other cluster schools. So Manor View, I think, is the elementary school that they'd be going into. So can you guys speak to those parents, one, and speak to those issues around the well, I think you've done a lot to speak to this racism and classism already, but in terms of those parents that would be going from Arundel to Meade, and the people who would be at Meade accepting parents from Arundel who have been characterizing their neighborhood in such a way. Go ahead.
Dana, do you want to jump in or shall I? I'm happy to. Okay. Yeah, we've had the emails.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you say?
I'll be honest with you. A lot of these emails, I read every email I get. I have not responded to all of them by a long shot because I'm just taking in all the information I get. That's my job right now. I'm going to be honest with you. We get a lot of people. One of the things that gets thrown around in this particular issue is, loss of property value.
Yeah, I
all
heard that
these things.
yesterday.
Well, that's not our job. There are no guarantees. You move into a neighborhood, redistricting is always a possibility. That's how it works. And I find it, how do I put this nicely? I'm not interested in entertaining those kinds of statements about other schools and other people. My own daughter graduated from Annapolis High. There are lots of people who have plenty of opinions about Annapolis High who have never stepped foot in Annapolis High. In fact, when I gave my remarks at the graduation of Annapolis High this spring, I spoke extensively about that to the graduates because they know it's true. As Dana noted earlier, every school has its particular things it offers to students. Every school has a lot of spectacular teachers. Every school has students who achieve incredible things. And people make a lot of assumptions. And if I may say so, we're in a moment in our country and in this world to a large extent where there is this increasing notion that you just have to, be in a world just with people just like you, whatever that means. I think personally, that's about the worst thing we can do for our young people to prepare them, honestly. But in general, these are not, in my opinion, the reasons not to redistrict. We redistrict based on data, based on the needs of balancing the system. And as I said, making sure that every student is in a facility that is appropriate for the number of students that are there that can offer what the students need. That is my goal. And when I get up in the morning as a board member, as I've done for the last 5 years now, I guess, the thing in my head is my sort of aspirational goal is that it should not matter where you live in this county, your child will have a great school to go to. That's my job. And that's what I'm focused on. And so I listen to those things when people say them, but that's not how I make my decisions.
Can I ask, before we go to Ms. Shalheim, how many more schools do we expect to build after this redistricting and we get the state funds and whatnot? What are we looking at? Do we
Well,
know?
I don't think we know. But here's what I'll say with regard to my own district. I mentioned earlier that we have such low usage relative to the population in the Annapolis cluster, but we're doing our job. You know, MSDE sends out its report cards every year. Our schools in the Annapolis cluster, we got a ton of 4 and 5-star schools. And more and more people are wanting to send their kids to our schools. And so as the need increases, we're going to have to, if that continues, we're going to have to build more schools.
Right, and you had mentioned that the number of people at the Saturday meeting. You mentioned that we're the fastest growing. We're going to be like the fastest growing school system in the state.
Yep.
So I wanted to see whether or not. And last night, I think one of the concerns was that we opened up the school. We allowed development without building more schools, and so Odenton and the Crofton and those areas are experiencing this growth and the overcrowding without having the schools built. So that's why I was wondering in
Well,
terms of like the number of schools that we might be thinking about.
so let me just say, elections matter. Who's sitting in the county executive seat? Who's sitting in the governor's seat? Who's sitting in the MGA matters, right? We've had different groups, different individuals, and we got some crazy development that was approved depending on whoever the administration was. So
Yes, Steve Shu like developers. Steve Shu was a big fan.
So here's another AACP focus, I think, is helping people see that redistricting does not exist in a vacuum. Okay. It's this thing that is tied into everything else, right? So who you vote for as your congressperson, your senator, your governor, your county council, your county executive, your board of education, all of those things matter because they're all intertwined. And so if we do our job, we do a good job using our facilities to the best of our ability. There's some things that, we don't have the infrastructure for. Chesapeake High School is one of them because of Mountain Road. If we do our best, then we're in a better position to go to the state when we need new facilities, new additions, new whatever, and say, okay, we need this now, and we can get it. But that depends on having funders at the county council, funders at the state level who are going to support that. And now I will get off my soapbox.
You're muted, Mary.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin.
I have one more question about the teachers, the diversity of the faculty. But that's all I wanted to know was like in terms of moving forward. I think one of the issues that we've been talking about is if we're shifting students from majority minority schools to majority white schools, how are we shifting the teacher core? And I was wishing that we could have our TAC president on, but she dropped off. She told me she didn't have much time. But like in terms of diversifying the faculty at the schools that are being that are experienced in the phase 2 schools, like how do we see that happening in the near future, especially under the blueprint? Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I just want to hop on, piggyback on lots of things that Joanna just said, and I agree with all of them. People don't hide some of the reasons why they're writing us to advocate for or against whatever it is they're advocating for or against, and usually there's an ism on the end of that, and there certainly is the case between Piney Orchard and Manorview. And I blame rampant overdevelopment with poor planning as a core issue as to why we're seeing what we're seeing in that part of our county that predates all of us, and it absolutely ties back to elections. You can't say out of one side of your mouth that half of your development is going to be 55 and older, and then say, just kidding, it's not, out of the other side, and expect the infrastructure to support all of the housing that you're building. And so, yeah, it's an unfortunate thing to have to touch some students twice with the redistricting, but we've said from jump that that there was going to be some situations where this was unavoidable, and this is one of them. Now, how that boundary ends up looking, what it ends up looking like, is an open question, because there's some funky stuff with the drawing of that map, and that predates the first round and the second round, that was just, sort of left there from before, that maybe we can look at, and maybe we can help tighten up, or maybe not. I just don't know yet. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say with regard to teacher recruitment. It's always been our goal to attract and retain a teaching force that looks like the student body of this county. That's a commitment of this board. It always has been. It's very important to me. I told you I was brought up in Los Angeles. And now I live in a part of Anne Arundel County that's pretty homogenous. I miss diversity a lot, and I think that that those resources will be moved around accordingly, and that's not my lane, that's Dr. Bedell's lane. So I just wanted to point that out, and we are continuing to recruit as very best we can a workforce that looks like our student body.
I want to thank our board members very, very, very much. I want to thank everybody who's attended. This will be seen by more people, and so thank you for agreeing to the recording. I had one small point that, as a member of the audience, I would like to add in. I think it was you, Dr. Tobin, who spoke about you wish we could see the embargo data now. And I've gotten hints of it, and we've seen embargo data come out in bits and pieces, and it's what Dr. Bedell promised. Give me a while and you're going to see the numbers change. And they have changed. Those are performance data. They are magnificent and they are important. But there's another set of data. The school system and MSDE have discipline data. And we have insufficient gathering of safety and well-being data, but there's some. And the issues we've talked about here, especially when you think about the hostilities and concerns around, my child's not going to go to Meade. That's safety data. That's environment and well-being data. And so a plea that has been launched through the Equity Advisory Committee all the way to Dr. Bedell by now, I now bring to the board. Get us those data too. It's just as important. I see that our Political Action Committee Chair, Kiana Banks, has her hand up, and I know it's past 7:30. If you need to leave, please go. But I would like to open the floor for Ms. Banks, and then we'll close the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Apologize for being off camera. I'm in the middle of also trying to make dinner. But this has been very, very helpful. I'm relatively new to Crofton and to the county. I moved here at the top of 2023. My son is a student at Crofton High. So I was just wondering if there was any sort of explanation for why the population of Crofton was so underestimated that has put us in a place to now have to deal with this redistricting for this brand new high school. And like, what are we doing moving forward? And I think you touched on this a little bit, moving forward to make sure that, or try, I guess, to prevent it from happening, especially for a newer school moving forward in the future.
I can speak to this because I was part of the first round of Crofton redistricting in 2019. I referred to it earlier. It wasn't fun. That school was built too small based on, again, elections matter, the belief of the administration of this county at the time, wanting a boutique little small high school that was opened overcrowded. So we knew it was going to be opened overcrowded, and we knew we would be back here again, and here we are. I didn't want to be back here again, but because I'm still traumatized from that process in 2019. But that's the reason, is that it was built too small. It didn't accommodate, and still doesn't, the population that it serves. It's a beautiful building and a great facility, and it's unfortunate that here we are. I don't know that we underestimated or overestimated the data. The school was built too small. So I hope that that's helpful, and I understand that this is a crazy process for all of us to endure again.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone who's been here through this, who's able to come in at any point. Those who will be watching it after the fact, thank you, thank you, thank you for being with us. I greatly appreciate the tonality of jointly addressing from our different perspectives, shared problems with not just our own individual concerns in mind, but the well-being of everyone who attends the schools and the families they represent. We shall continue. May you all have a good evening. And I'm about to close the meeting. Goodbye.